Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the Mr. Fix-It channel. Well, I was out at the park riding my Scrambler yesterday morning and a little bit of issues. So let's find out what's going on. Stay tuned.
I was sitting out there in the shed one evening, not doing too much of nothing, just kind of staring at the wall.
Okay, so out here at the park, I call them water bars or water breaks. There's a bunch of little jumps everywhere, little humps that, you know, keep erosion down, and there's thousands of these things everywhere, and the easiest way to get over them is to just, you know, jump off of each one of them. And every time I would jump off of one, after a while I kept hearing a loud popping sound somewhere in this area. So I pulled the chain and all this stuff off, and I was hoping that it was the sprocket slipping on the splines. Although this one is worn out and loose on the splines, I'd had a spare sprocket and I put that one on there. It's a little tighter, but I don't see where this was slipping. So I started digging a little deeper. I checked my transmission fluid, and this is what I found. It's supposed to be purple. Yeah, that's a metal milkshake. So I think my problem's inside the transmission. Yeah. So these transmissions have a chain in them. They're called a silent chain, and that runs your forward gears. Reverse gears is actual gears making contact, but in forward it's chain driven. Now what I'm suspecting here is that chain has come loose from wear, and it's slipping on the teeth inside the transmission, and all that metal in there, it's aluminum, so it's not magnetic. So somewhere something's chewing itself to pieces. So I'm gonna have to pull the transmission apart, find out what's going on with this thing. So to get this transmission out of here, you got to disconnect all this stuff, the chain, the brake, all that. You got to get all this side apart, which I've already started doing. The rear fenders have got to come off, seats got to come off, air box has got to come out. This whole side's got to come apart, the belt cover, the clutches, the inner cover, all that stuff's got to come out and get disconnected. Along with that, the swing arm pivot pins stab into the sides of the transmission on both sides, so those have got to come loose. I don't think I have to take the swing arm all the way out. I might be able to just back those bolts out of the transmission, and there's a few bolts in the transmission, and then the linkage has got to come off to get this transmission out. So let's get into all that. One more bolt. It's right there. It's a through bolt. Transmission kind of pivots on it. So I had to take the skid plate to get that one out. That's the last bolt. The tranny should come out. There it is. Alright, so I got this thing in drive, and I'm holding the output shaft, turning the input shaft, and you can hear the slop in that chain. There's a lot of movement there. I'm pretty sure that's what the problem is this primary drive chain inside here. I want to clean this thing before I take it apart, so let's do that. Alright, well, it isn't any prettier, but it is cleaner. Alright, now we can take this thing apart. Bolt perimeter, take those apart. There's some screwing around in the shifter that you got to deal with. I'm going to make sure I get this thing back in neutral before I take it apart. There we go. Yeah, that don't sound good, listen. So, let's see what we can see. 3/8 bolts. Is the suspense getting to you yet? This shaft's a little stuck in that bearing, so it's kind of binding up on me. There we go. Look at the slop in that chain. Do believe that is my problem right there. It looks like it's been rubbing the case. Probably been rubbing the case somewhere, and that's why all the metal milkshake. So I'm gonna try to shift this and get the shift linkage out of place there. We can shove this shaft out. Just want to look inside the case here and see if I can't find the source of where all the aluminum's coming from. See where the chain's been rubbing right there. Let's check the shift dogs. Yeah, there's a little bit of wear. You want to check right here and right here where these dogs come out. This is where the majority of your wear is going to happen as these mesh together. You know, when you have it idling too high or the engine's revved up and you try to put it in gear, this is what's clattering these pieces. So every time you hear those clatter, you're causing damage. The corners will be knocked off of these. Just want to give you a close-up of these shift dogs and what to look for as far as damage. So you can see that these slide together and then lock in there. This corner here is a machined corner because this transmission spins this way. That corner there should not have a chamfer on it. You can see the slight wear in the two corners of where those come together. So as your transmission is spinning in neutral and you go to put this in gear, this slides in and locks in like that. So when your idle's too high and this is spinning too fast and you go to try to shift this in gear, it's hitting there and bouncing back out. That's that clattering sound that you hear. So that is very bad for this transmission. You don't want it to do that. You want it to lock straight in. So if it's bouncing off that gear dog like that, that's causing damage. Now this is the reverse one, so this is where your driven clutch goes. This is the reverse shift dog, this is the forward shift dog. And again, this spins this way. You can see the wear on the corner right there and right there. So like I said, that corner there is supposed to have a chamfer on it because that helps it fall in. But you don't want those corners to be knocked off. And if they get knocked off too far, you'll have a really hard time getting this thing to engage into gear. This is the sprocket that the chain rides on, and this is the reverse drive sprocket. So when either one of these are engaged, this is your neutral. So both these can spin independently from the shaft. So you lock this in, it locks that to the shaft. When you lock this one in, it locks that one to the shaft. Let's see where it jumped. It's been jumping teeth though. You just have to slide into that. So not a lot of wear on the drive dogs. There is some, but not a lot, so that's a good sign. There's an awful lot of aluminum in that oil, and I don't see a lot of rubbing just right there. Maybe some right there. So I do need to order a chain, because there's a lot of slop in this chain. There is some wear on that gear. I think just doing a chain will probably be good enough. Yeah, there's a lot of slop in that chain. Okay, so I'm gonna have to get a chain on order. Clean this all up inside real good and put it back together. But until then, I'm just gonna put this transmission back together real quick. Alright, I put this all back together for safe storage until the new parts get here. Don't worry, I will show you how this all goes back together when the new parts get here, so don't worry. Alright, well, some of you may know this, but I joined this group on Facebook called Polaris 400 2-Strokes ATVs Parts and Tech, and while I was filming this video, I got in contact with a guy from this group about buying a transmission. I really just needed part of this transmission, but he was going to sell me the entire transmission at what I thought was a reasonable price. But let me go to my messages here, and I just want to show you. This guy's name is Danny Kleiber. I guess that's how you pronounce that. So this was a transaction that we had. Where are we at here? So you can read through this. I want to block out the part that has my address in it. Okay, you can see that I agreed to his shipping methods. Okay, and then goes on. Okay, notice the date here, Friday at 8:42 p.m. This is now Thursday, a week later, and he doesn't want to message, probably because he knows he's going to blow me off. But
to be honest, I thought about you yesterday, but I couldn't remember your name to message you. I'm glad you messaged me. I can go pull it off tonight and get it in the mail to you tomorrow if you're serious. But I just don't want to pull it off if you're not sure you want it, you know what I mean? I do quite a bit of shipping. Judging by the size of it and weight, I know it's probably going to be at least $50. I can tell you that. Somewhere in the $50 range, maybe a little more, a little less. I wouldn't think it'd be more than $70. But yeah, if you want it for $100 plus the shipping, I will pull it. Just let me know.
I agreed to his price, I agreed to everything, but this guy, all I wanted to know was how much it was going to cost to ship this transmission from Missouri to Ohio. Yeah, it was going to be some money, but I didn't know exactly how much. I wanted to know exactly how much. If you read back through the comments, you can see he was supposed to get back to me and never did. So I did my own shipping calculator, just show him it's really not that hard. And then, yeah. This right here is what got me. Knew he was bullshitting. Why are you never answering or agreeing to my form of payment? I did already. He never scrolled up. But see, after this, I didn't get to send this message to him because after he sent this, he blocked me. So I do not recommend anybody doing any business with this person here. If you've had luck with him, good for you, but this guy blew me off for a week and called me a bullshitter. All I wanted was the shipping cost. That's all I wanted. He was supposed to do that. I waited a week for him to do that, and now I'm just bullshitting. I don't get it. See, this day and age where we communicate like this, you can't just punch someone in the face when they're rude to you in person. They can just block you and feel big and tough. So in my life, I pretty much just let stuff go. You know, it's not really worth it. But the older I get and the more I take, the more I don't let things go anymore. So Danny, if you're watching this one's for you, buddy. Yeah, Facebook Marketplace, 60 bucks. Alright, so USPS and their infinite resources decided to send my parts to the wrong city, not once, but twice. So it took a long time to get here, but I finally got my parts in. This is your part number right here, this 3233111, silent chain. This is a type 3 transmission, the easy shift chain drive. So this is what the old chain, how much slack it has. You can see how much play there is there. It's very loose. So let's get this chain in there and I'll show you how much less slack there is in this is, yeah. Alright, so we're going to take our old chain, we're going to throw it over there, take the new chain, just roll that guy on there like that. Now when you put this transmission back together, you're basically going to have to put it all in as one assembled unit. And it's kind of tricky. It takes 3 hands, but for some reason I only have 2. So get your shift fork installed like this. Pick this thing up, run that shaft through. Try not to smash your fingers and try not to damage your steel. So until we get close, I'm going to leave this part out. I'm going to start that shaft so that the bearing starts to seat. Like that. Now while this shaft is still loose, we'll go ahead and put the fork on. Got to make sure you get that shift fork in the shift gears dog slider deal things there. So you kind of got to reach in here with one finger and get one started. Down in there like that. Got to get that hooked in there and then kind of slide this up and get the other one hooked in. It's going to go in that hole right there. So the high-low transmissions for the 400Ls and the Foremans and stuff, they have 2 of these shafts and 2 of these shift forks, and it is quite a bit more challenging to get together. Now this nub in here, it's got to go under that spring. So we're going to get a screwdriver, we're going to pry that spring up. We're going to try to get that up underneath there while you hold all this together. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do. I'm sure somebody that does this all the time could just throw this thing together, but I don't mess with these transmissions every day, so it's a little bit tricky for me to get this all together. See, a smart YouTuber would have practiced this a few times before he put it together on camera. But this is reality, right? There. Now I got that nub behind that spring. Now I can start shoving gears together. Got to get that shaft seated in the bearing pocket. Where'd my rubber mallet go? So I'm going to drive this one down. I'm going to drive this one down. Again, I got to go all these in at the same time here. Okay, vice grips. And I'm going to shift this down into neutral. And that's basically it. Once you get it here, you got to put some silicone on the edges, and you can put this other cover back on. That's the fairly easy part. I'm just going to show you how this thing shifts. So that is going into forward gear. So that's forward, neutral, and reverse. Alright, now with the new chain in, let's see how much slack we got. See, very minimal slack there. It was rubbing right there. So this is going to be much tighter. Okay, other things you want to check while you're in here is all these bearings, the gear teeth, and there's also needle bearings, if you can see them just poking out inside that gear there. You want to check those. And when you're putting this together, you want to be careful not to tear this seal here. These seals can be replaced while the transmission is assembled. So you got that one there, and you got two on this side. So if you put this back together and the seals are leaking, you can replace these while it's all assembled, so don't worry about that too much. You also want to check inside here where the shift forks ride. You don't want any excessive side to side, and you don't want any gouging or scoring in either one of these. My transmission has a bad shaft, whereas these splines are wore out for the sprocket, and also this part of the shaft for the bearing shaft support rides is worn out. So I really do need a new shaft here, but all I'm doing right now is this chain. This will get me by, so I'm not really worried about the rest of this stuff. I'll replace that stuff as it comes. It's not that big of a deal for me to pull this transmission out and take it apart, so I'm just doing what it needs for now. I'm just letting you guys know that if you're going to go in here and rebuild your transmission, you might want to think about go ahead and replacing all these bearings. Check your shafts for any wear. Check these forks for wear. Get a new chain. Get all new seals for it. And that way, once you go in here and do this, you can do it all at once and it's all done. Alright, a little more information about this chain. So there's, I think, 3 different chains that you can get for these transmissions. One is a short one. That's for the 4-wheel drive high-low transmission. It's only about half this length. And then there's 2 long chains. And this particular transmission for the Scrambler. Now the Scrambler is pretty much the only one that uses this transmission. That, as far as I can tell, there may be a Trail Boss out there that uses this transmission, but from what I can tell, this is a Scrambler transmission. So back to the chain, I counted 30 links. So if we start here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and go all the way around, there's 30 links. There's also chains that have more of these plates, and I counted 11 in this chain. So you want to make sure you get the correct chain. So 30 links and 11 plates wide. That is for this transmission. This transmission, oh, I can't remember the part number. I'll put the part number up on the screen for this specific transmission. Okay, as far as sealing this up, there is no gasket. You make a gasket. My manual recommends that you use Loctite 515, which I don't have, but what I do have is this anaerobic gasket maker, which is a lot like Loctite. You can also use the Permatex Gray or Honda Bond or a type of silicone like that. So just use silicone or some type of Loctite or this stuff, anaerobic sealer. So I'm just going to apply a thin coat of this anaerobic sealer to both halves of the case. Don't go crazy with this stuff. You'll be globbed, it'll squish out and get in the gear. Don't, just put a little bit. It don't take a lot. Just a thin coat on both sides. Don't go crazy. Like I said, this stuff will glob up and get into the gears and the bearings and everything. Okay, right before I put this thing together, I'm going to take a little bit of my Polaris transmission fluid and I'm going to put some down in these bearings because they're going to see the oil blast. So I just want to make sure I get a little bit of lube down in those bearings. Maybe put some on the shift forks, put a little on the seals. Now we can slide this thing together. You got your alignment pins. You'll have to seat those in. Alright, I'm going to snug these up in a crisscrossing pattern just to make sure everything seats down evenly. And you notice I'm not using a DeWalt impact. Alright, so you can see I just put a very thin coat on both of these case halves, and you can see how much of that gasket maker squished out. You're going to have an equal amount squished out on the inside of the transmission. So if you glob that on there and you got a bunch of this goo sticking out here, you got that much inside. And what I like about this anaerobic gasket maker is this stuff only hardens up in the absence of air. So everything that's outside in the air is never going to set up, and everything that's inside is never going to set up. So it's not going to turn hard and get into the gears and bushings and bearings and cause damage. It will stay a liquid. That's why I like this anaerobic gasket maker. Okay, I'm going to torque these bolts to 84 inch-pounds. That's 7 foot-pounds. And for you metric guys, that looks like that is this many Newton meters. And again, I'm going to do this in a crisscrossing pattern. And I'm going to go and check them all to make sure I didn't miss any. This is an awkward thing to work on for sure. I'm just going to wipe up all this excess gasket maker so that it's not sticky and gooey while I try to handle it. Alright, there's that. Not too bad. Pretty easy. Like I said, the high-low transmissions like this are quite a bit more parts involved, but still not real tricky. I mean, you may need 4 hands for that one, whereas this one you only need 3. Okay, the last step here is let's make sure it'll shift through the gears. Alright, there's reverse, neutral, and there's forward. And just as a side note, if you would like to add a speedometer to your Scrambler, it does have the provisions for the angle drive for the speedometer. You need the key and the angle drive and the cable and the mount and the speedometer itself, and you can install a speedometer on your Scrambler if you so wish. Alright, so I started that bolt in. Hopefully that'll hold the transmission up enough to get, because that other bolt's back in behind here. You almost can't even see it. And that's got to go through the bottom of the transmission, through the frame. So got that bolt started in there. Hopefully that'll help me out. Looking for that bolt to come out. Looking for that bolt to come out right there. Yeah, went right in that time. So you got one bolt on either side. Go ahead and start those in. That'll help get that long bolt through the center. Down there. I'm going to go ahead and stick these spacers in the bushings back here. Got to get these swing arm bolts pushed through and lined up and stabbed into the transmission here. Alright, getting this swing arm pivot bushing together. Having trouble getting a nut in, so I figured pull that spacer off, pull that washer off, stick that nut in there first, then get these two parts in there. Alright, well that was a struggle getting that thing back together. So, alright, got that started, get that nut threaded on there, and we'll move on. Alright, before I go any further, I want to top the transmission off fluid and check for leaks. Alright, you're going to want to torque the swing arm pivot bolts to 50 foot-pounds, and then rebend these tabs back over to lock it in place. And do the same to the other side. Alright, I got a couple new sprockets, so I'll go ahead and get these on here. Of course, this one will go on later. Now, when you put this thing on, you want to make sure that the grease zerk is pointing up and to the back, like that. And if you had shims here or here, you want to make sure you replace those shims so that this gets aligned correctly. And it's a good idea right now to go ahead and grease that bushing, grease that bushing, and grease that bushing. And while you're back there, go ahead and grease those bearings. Okay, after you install your brake rotor, don't forget this little C-clip that goes on the shaft right there. You have to have this. Alright, I got the brake rotor installed, got the caliper installed, got the new sprocket installed, got the chain on there, got the chain cover on there. Before you button any of this up, you want to make sure you get that exhaust heat shield in place, because it's almost impossible to get in once you get the rear fenders on and get that bolted in. So that'll be the next part for this side, and then I'll probably go ahead and get the carburetor and airbox put back in, and then I'll go start working on the other side. 18 foot-pounds. Put it in gear and hold the brake. If you're real careful, you can hold this clutch with a pry bar like this and torque this to 40 foot-pounds. And I also ordered another shaft for this transmission, so I'll have two good transmissions. So when I'm out here at the park giving this thing the beans and something breaks in the transmission, all I gotta do is, you know, I need a mow down here. But that's the transmission chain replacement. Getting that transmission out there isn't too big of a deal. Putting it back in, however, is a little bit tricky, having to get everything lined back up. It's probably a 6-hour job altogether if you're going to do, you know, like transmission bearings and replace that chain and do some other work. I did do some other work while I was in there, like I did the swing arm bushings and had to do a few other things. So yeah, I would say about 6 hours or so, give or take, depending on the tools that you have and the knowledge that you have. If you guys like this video, please give me a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and don't be afraid to fix it. Thanks for watching.